Trey Lance is out. Jimmy Garoppolo is in for the 49ers offense. That and more this week on the Footballguys Dynasty Show. And Jordan, let's call it the Footballguys Dynasty Show jinx, because we've been talking about this since the spring. And here we are, as we all knew, week 3, Jimmy Garoppolo, starting quarterback for the 49ers. And there's a lot to unpack here. Dynasty-wise, we passed back some texts with Trey Lance. What's the action plan here? I did some Twitter polls. So here we are, super flex. There's big implications, but also for the 49ers offense, big implications for the rest of the year.
Yeah, if it does feel like we threw down a bit of a jinx. Trey Lance, we hardly knew you. What do you think? I keep coming back to the idea of like, what does his future look like? You know, you look at after he's into, this is year 2. He'll be going into year 3 next year. That's historically a big pivot point. I don't know, right? You either do it by year 3 as a top 10 quarterback, or you don't really do it. It's kind of there's like 2 doors there, really, historically. So I think you could forgive him a little bit because he didn't, like, it was never the plan to bring him in and start him year 1. He gets hurt year 2. You know, what's year 3 going to be like? But on the same token, like, he hasn't played football in 3 years. And so in the competitive football that he's played was like less than 500 attempts in Division 2, right? You know, Division 1 AA or whatever the F
through now. It's like 400 and something of
right.
Competitive college plus NFL dropbacks. It's unbelievable, like the low volume. I mean, some guys like Bryce Young will get that in a season, one season. So they'll have 2 to 3x that by the time they get to the NFL. They'll start starting, relatively soon. He's a very interesting case. I will say one Twitter poll I put out there is, how far do the 49ers have to go this season to make fans, the franchise, like, is there anything that he can do to say, I'm the captain. I was the captain. I am the captain now for 2023. Like, for you to want him back, or, I mean, and frankly, about half said Super Bowl, getting to the Super Bowl, and some people even just said make the playoffs. I think it's interesting because they're a good team. And frankly, I think that at this point in time, they're a better team with Jimmy Garoppolo. I know free Brandon Ayuk. That was one of my biggest things. You look at what they did last week in week 2, the market share of Brandon Ayuk, and then Deebo Samuel. I think his air yards was like right near the line of scrimmage. Like, he barely had any. He was basically offensive weapon. And it was Brandon Ayuk, wide receiver 1. And I think that's something really to monitor with the new Jimmy Garoppolo addition here for the offense.
Yeah, I think it's gonna tip the whole thing. I mean, we'll see Kittle back, right? We could see a pretty high-powered offense, right? I mean, this is when this offense gets going. This offense can be dangerous. I mean, it has very rarely sort of been everyone healthy, everyone sort of fully playing. I'd be curious to see, like, you can, if you go to the NBA, you can see like how many minutes have these players played together. Like, it hasn't a healthy Ayuk, Deebo, Garoppolo, and Kittle has not played in very many games. And so I'd be really interested to see sort of what that is. I was like thinking about buying low on Lance. You look, he was a top 20 pick in Superflex Dynasty drafts. If you could sort of get that for a first, I sort of like that price point. The problem that I have is it then it takes away your ability to do something you like to do more than have Trey Lance for that first, right? So it precludes you from making a different trade to address a different need down the stretch. If something happens, I mean, we've had 2 starting quarterbacks get hurt in 2 weeks.
Well, and does that go away? Here's the other thing. Let's say even if that pick ends up on the later side and you hold, you go into the offseason, you get to your rookie draft, it's 110. Do you still think you can't get that trade done? Because there's so many moving pieces here. What if Garoppolo's back? What if entering year 3? I mean, that's a pivotal year for Trey Lance. Like, is that something you want to buy into? Do you want to buy into the critical year, or would you rather buy into someone that's not in a critical year? And like you said, I mean, it precludes you from making a trade to help you now. at some point between now and the playoffs making a dynasty trade, but it helps you this year as well. I just think it limits you in a lot of ways. One thing I asked is, where's the closest ranking to Trey Lance in dynasty quarterbacks? QB 5, 10, 15, 20 plus. And 54% QB 15. 34% said QB 20 plus. So I'm sure you can get QBs around there for a first, and probably one better, or one that is helping you now, plus a lot more job security. Because a lot of times after year 3 is when you get that deal. You're a good quarterback. We're not going to mess around with a 5th-year option. You have proven it to us. Here is your big deal. Trey Lance, I mean, is he going to get that? Is he going to get that? I mean, he still hasn't really played. And he doesn't look like he's, from the minimal squinty stuff we've seen, doesn't really seem on that path. We're calling him an incomplete grade, but if you had to say success or failure so far, not success.
Yeah,
if you had to grade him right now.
Yeah, we're gonna be what? This is entering year 3. This is the second year without their first round pick for Lance. Like next year will be year 3 from that trade, and it'll be interesting because that team is going to make the playoffs. Made the playoffs last year. Went to an NFC Championship game last year. Could make the playoffs this year, and honestly, if you look, like I think they might be the best team in the NFC West. Like it wouldn't shock me if they played deep into January, and like they could be entering next year with not have using any of those picks and gone to deep into the playoffs twice without those picks. I think when will that catch up to them is an interesting question, but also like you haven't got anything for it at all. Like you've got nothing, you spent the picks and got nothing for it. It's like the reverse Rams, like where the Rams get star players. They have gotten, less than 300 snaps. Like that's what they've gotten. It's a really interesting. That's how good that team is, right? Like without those picks, they have gotten this far. So, I actually think this is a great opportunity for Garoppolo. Like this is the best case scenario for Garoppolo. He comes back into a system he knows. He's going to get a full sort of, not a full year, but essentially an entire year to prove himself. And he's going to be able to hit the free agent market if they can't tag him, right? Like he's going to get all of he's going to be he's going to be a starting quarterback hitting free agency, and that almost never happens, right? When's the last? I think Kirk Cousins is the last time it's actually happened.
True free agency, right?
Yeah. So this could be a really interesting, and plus that's happening when the cap's going up. Like he's going to find himself in like a really lucrative spot where, a couple of months ago we were like, does he have a spot in the NFL? And now all of a sudden he's going to be like, he could be worth a 9-figure contract, and I don't think anyone's could blink by the time that's done.
I know you do dynasty rankings more in tiers and buckets, correct?
Yeah.
What tier and bucket is Trey Lance in? What's your descriptor for Trey Lance? And I don't know if that changed from a week ago to now, but what is the description on said bucket?
I think I would say he's more of a he's a ceiling risk play, right? He's a very high variance play. He's on the young. I sort of put him in age versus production buckets, right? He's the young and unproven bucket of quarterbacks, and that comes with a lot of risk. There's a payoff. I think what's interesting is like, all right, do you like if there's a trading difference between Fields and Lance, like is that something that interests you in taking the Lance side of that and getting Lance plus for Fields? Right? I think those types of deals are a little bit more interesting. I think the deals in that type of category for that type of quarterback, take away the name for it, right? I don't want to necessarily tie up future firsts with those trades. I want to sort of I want to sort of have him be a piece that I'm sort of building up to, right, in a trade where I'm packaging a couple of lower pieces. Heck, maybe that person's contending this year and they need running back help, and they see, they'd say, I don't want to trade my first round pick, but I have the functional equivalent of a first round pick in Trey Lance, right? Those are the types of deals I'd be super interested in because I think the payoff could be big. Right? I didn't like the payoff of Trey Lance at 202 in a startup draft. But if we're talking, late first in a rookie draft, like that's a place where we could swing from. And, that's the type of that cost is the type of stuff that can really change your thing. This is just all downside. And I'll say the other thing too. I was thinking about this. I think the big takeaway from this is like, if you are taking a player in the top 30 picks of a startup draft and that player gets hurt in week 2 of the season and can no longer draw you a first round rookie pick, you've picked the wrong player. I think that's a rule that I've come from coming out of this is like you can't pick a player where that's going to happen to him. And I think unproven quarterbacks is probably unproven quarterbacks and sort of older running backs are sort of in that range of guys that I are really dangerous players in that aspect.
Yeah, kind of playing that out. If that was a 27-year-old running back, that season is critical. 27, 28. We used to see guys like that go in the first, second round all the time if they were all timers. But we don't see that as much anymore. We see that creep away. I have Trey Lance in the tier that is QB 16 to 21. So again, I think that's probably somewhere in the middle of the market. It sounds like a lot of the market, at least on that quick little poll, would be QB 15 to 20, somewhere in that range, which I think is fair. You see a drop off by that point where maybe it's a 1-year play or 1 year and assess, Tom Brady type. It's guys of, are you going to get more than 1 year of startability, fantasy wise, or like if you're going for that, is that a Zach Wilson unknown? Is that a Carson Wentz? Is that a Jared Goff? Like how many seasons are you getting from these? It's let's call them dirty profiles a little bit. There's something on there there's a reason they're down there. And so I think that's where Trey Lance fits. Does he give you one? The job security factor, because a lot of people think, this offense is going to be better off with Jimmy Garoppolo. That's not a great feel for Trey Lance of like, whew, thank goodness he's out of there. So we have this other guy. Like, I just, that's where we are, like you said, 2 weeks in and basically season 2, where we still had to wait for this.
Yeah. So you mentioned someone that I'm curious, like how we think about this. What about him versus Zach Wilson? Right. Like, I think you want Zach Wilson, right? Because you're going to get
do we?
Well, I think you get a reveal this year, right? You are going to have an idea of where he's going. And I think you want to take the shot this year, right? That's would sort of be my thought. Like, would you rather sit and sort of wait and hope for Lance in year 3 with all the factors we talked about? Or would you rather sort of take that reveal right now with the hope of he's taking a step forward and this offense we know can kind of cook? So
is your take, well, if Joe Flacco can do well in the Jets, like why can't Zach Wilson? Or do you say it might just work better with Joe Flacco and Wilson might mess it up?
Are
you open to both of those?
You have to. All right, so we can now pivot from the Jimmy Garoppolo to Jimmy Garoppolo Jr., who's Tua. Down in Miami. In these San Francisco Shanahan offenses, I think you got to be an idiot to screw up the quarterback position. Like you got to really not be good. And we've seen because I'll tell you why. Like when you look at some of the advanced stats on these guys, like Garoppolo, his entire tenure has been over 8 yards an attempt, like really sort of humming it, like can really put it together, like some good numbers there in San Francisco. He doesn't do anything hard. Like when you look he turns the ball over at a really high rate, and he doesn't throw. PFF has a metric called big time throws, and his ratio on big time throws to turnover worthy plays is half. Right, for every turnover worthy play he throws, he throws for every big time throw he throws 2 turnover worthy plays. Tua is the exact same guy, right? And so we saw, and again, he didn't do anything super spectacular this past week. He
waited for the Ravens to just have some apocalyptic glasses.
Right.
Yeah,
but when you look at it
in coverage, kept running the wrong direction 2 times.
Yeah. When you look at it, like they're the same, they're essentially the same player in the offense. Like again, it's a short sample size on him, but he has thrown twice as many turnover-worthy plays as big time throws in his career. They're the same profile. So for Zach Wilson to not be able to produce in that type of format is like it takes a real failure. And honestly, like Flacco, like we could talk about Flacco too. We don't really need to, but like he was basically run out of the league. You know what I mean? Like he was on his last legs. I think he might have been not on a team at points last year. So, and he comes back and can do this. I mean, like you got to really, really, really flounder to not be able to succeed in some of these spots. And like that Jet situation is pretty good. With Garrett Wilson on the board, with Davis there playing, with Elijah Moore, who's basically been the least of those guys and might be the best of them. So, I mean, I'm super intrigued by that, and I think that Zach Wilson could benefit. And I've thought all along that he probably had the highest upside of any guy, probably not named Trey Lance from this class, just because of how good that system and how good the players are in it.
Yeah. One of the things I'm watching for the Jets is, they finished last year on a good stretch. One of the articles at Football Guys is high leverage opportunities for running backs. It's something you're going to get weekly updates from. You can find on my article and author page. But the Jets are sky high this year, and they're getting a ton of targets for the running back position. That's 2 weeks in a row. I think it's going to stabilize and stay up there. Really interesting from do we get a clarified situation with Michael Carter or Breece Hall out, or one of them taking over at some point in time? I think that probably is Breece Hall if we accelerate a month and a half or something. I think we're going to move in that direction. It's not starting the season that direction. But and you said pressing the easy button. I mean, 2 good running backs in the passing game and giving them plenty of targets, that's an easy button. And you know what? Take note, Jameis Winston. Take note, Baker Mayfield, because with Kamara and with Christian McCaffrey, they're not getting the easy button, through 2 games. And I know Kamara missed this past game, but those are 2 offenses that I'm pretty concerned about. Like, can you get your pass catching running backs, the guys that are, should just be eating, they're not getting the ball, but yet Michael Carter, Breece Hall, guys like that are getting the ball, and doing something after the catch. So I think, like you just said, is it a conducive system, and can you make it easier and on your quarterback? And those are some of the ways that you can.
Yeah, for sure. Can we hit one other player? Like, what do you think about so Jalen Hurts? They did basically a lot of the stuff that we had hoped that they would do, right? Hey, you go out and get AJ Brown, you go and get and sort of signal to us that you want to go back to the sort of pass heavy role, right? He's getting 40 dropbacks a game through 2 games. I don't know if you saw this, but he's the PFF's best graded passer through 2 games. This is a big step can he sort of be one of these next guys that turns into being, the $100 million contract guy? We didn't think that was going to happen. I'm not putting him in the category yet, but this has opened my eyes to the fact that I think it's a lot more possible than maybe sitting here a couple months did. And I was sort of open to that idea because I thought they're going to give him the opportunity to do it. Like, this is a really good early return on Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, this is year 3, right? So I think this is a critical one for him coming into the off season, where we mentioned they have the capital, but if the season goes well, then this is kind of the year you need to not go into that contract year and start playing those reindeer games, as I call them, with the contract, like we're seeing with Lamar Jackson, which is a very interesting one. And of course, he comes out and he's lighting it up. So, you get a player motivated, all of a sudden magic can happen. And if you have a motivated Lamar Jackson, so he was not the problem on Sunday against Miami, not at all shredding teams. All right, football guys, episode 121 here of the Dynasty Show. Chad Parsons, Jordan McNamara. And I want to remind you to subscribe to Football Guys. That is footballguys.com/dynasty winners. That's where you want to subscribe. That's where you want to get all the content. Already mentioned high leverage opportunities. Jordan has a feature article weekly, a lot, and boosted Dynasty content on a weekly basis. Then at footballguys.com/dynasty winners.
It's time for the Stash of the Week, powered by Sleeper.
As always, we got our sleeper stash of the week, and it's a running back, shocker. And this is one, Jordan, that we had some clarity on. And it sounds like James Conner may not miss this week. That is still up in the air. We're going to monitor the practice reports. Gene Bramwell is all over it, as well as our injury correspondence here at Football Guys. But we saw clarity all along. It was Eno Benjamin as the number 2. But what we saw is 55-60% split with Darrell Williams there. We've seen him perform well in the past on other teams, but here he is potentially the guy to own, and he's out there in some leagues that are, 25-ish dynasty roster spots, maybe a little under that. He is available and he is out there, and honestly, the play, even if Connor's just a little dinged up, I think we have some tea leaves here that he, not Eno Benjamin, is the guy you want.
They split touches in terms of they split the carries this week. He got the goal line stuff. They were about the same in terms of routes run. I would be interested to see if it's going to be a multi-week injury for James Conner. Right? You definitely take the shot on Darrell Williams. I'm not sure it's going to be a week 1 start. You might want to see how that plays out. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I'm into him. I cut him in a couple of spots for Tony Jones because I like that opportunity for him to sort of get home to being a running back 2 quicker with the Kamara injury. And it looks like maybe I was right, but maybe it cut the wrong person. Maybe there's probably a receiver out there I could have cut. I could have really trimmed the excess fat that I'm sure that I had on my roster at wide receiver. But yeah, I think I like Darrell Williams a lot.
Yeah, and that's something, listeners and subscribers have been talking about a lot over the past week or two is Darrell Williams. I still think some of the cuts of him, since the season started, Eno Benjamin was the number 1, was the primary backup there in week 1. And, leapfrogging, it happens sometimes, but it's not super common. So I still think it was the right call. Mm-hmm. And if someone walked in and picked him up, I mean, to me, that's, you're picking up a number 3, and frankly, there's not many depth charts. You should pick up the number 3, and probably if you're 28, 30 roster spots, you probably kept him, because you probably didn't have a better pickup off the waiver wire. So it's interesting. I'm sure in the portfolio still have some, but lost some. We were at points where we were probably at 60-70% of rostership for Darrell Williams. So, and that's what you can't have a lot of allegiance. You got to chase opportunity. You got to chase where the depth chart is going. One good example seems like every year is San Francisco, for example. Where are we headed with this? We might head in 3 weeks that Marlon Mack is one of the last guys standing. So, but he was a cut. Let's face it, right? I mean, he didn't even make the 53. He's back with Houston. He's off Houston. Now he's back with the 49ers, but he's running back 6. You can't just hold through all of this. The roster spot value is just too much. And I want to make sure I included a couple Trey Lance trades this week because he is one of the names of the hour. We discussed, one data point of a 23 first, and that is a deal I've seen a couple times early this week. Let's do a different construction here. So we have all these are super flex. We have Trey Lance and Kenneth Walker for Russell Wilson and Christian Kirk.
I think you have to take the Russell Wilson side of this just because the gap is very right. The gap in future expectations about quarterbacks is substantial here, right? Wilson, it's not a great start, but listen, new quarterback, new head coach, first time head coach. You got to give it some time. He just signed a big contract. I get that it sort of hit the piñata that has that's wearing Russell Wilson's jersey week going around in the NFL circles. But this is just a smashing success trade there. I will say Kenneth Walker, the notable 4 broken tackles on 4 carries this past week and had 17 yards after contact in a game where he had 10 rushing yards. So already a beast through 1 week.
He's an analytics monster already. I will say that the situation for Seattle is pretty bleak for upside. I mean, they are, they are bottom 5 in the NFL in high leverage opportunities. They've yet to see a goal line carry, which not many teams can say that through a couple weeks. And then you say, well, they're not very good in targets either. So how are we going to have from Rashad Penny or anybody this year, especially with their quarterback situation? How are they going to have, somebody that's in the top 15 or so? It's just really, really hard. And pretty much the only guys that have bucked the trend are guys like Nick Chubb or Derrick Henry, where they don't need a top half of the NFL, Hilo score to to be a running back one, but most guys do. Almost everyone does. And so you're making that Walker bet for 2023 basically. And Christian Kirk, he's getting the targets. He's getting the love. I mean, they are using him like the contract he received. So you're getting a quarterback you can play now. I think Russell Wilson in Denver is an interesting watch. They look lost. Maybe they're just, hopefully winning some games. Can they be about 500 midseason and get their act together? But they're having trouble getting in and out of the huddle. They're having trouble just game management. It's 2 games in, but we will see. But Christian Kirk is startable. I mean, he is a tough to bench in three wide receiver format player. So yeah, I think this is a pretty easy win for the Wilson and Kirk side. And food for thought, because right now Walker is a backup. But even if he's a starter, not sure he's top 18 this year. Even if Penny is hurt tomorrow, I still don't know if he gets there. Next one, we have Trey Lance. Oh, and what do you think the Twitter result is on that deal?
Real heavy on the Christian Kirk side. I'd go 80% Kirk.
All right.
Kirk
I was going to say 75. We've got 72. Man. 72. I thought it would be higher too. All right. So we got Trey Lance Burks for Jimmy Garoppolo.
So this is interesting. It feels like, right? I mean, this feels like probably someone that was in on Trey Lance and didn't have Jimmy Garoppolo's backup, right? You go from non-premium position to premium position. You go from player that has a little bit of a hole in some of his profile that I think has gotten enhanced a little bit with some of the is he in shape, all that sort of stuff through the offseason. I don't think the last couple months have been that great for Trey Lance Burks. And then you get a premium position to presumably fill a hole is the reason.
Well, it better be filling a hole.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, I think you have to be sort of filling a hole is to do a trade like this. You don't do a trade like this and trade it for a quarterback 3. Like, this has to be a situation where you're like, all right, I need a quarterback, and this is sort of the best that I can do. Can
you pay less for Goff?
You might be able to pay less for Goff. And that was the other thing too, is I was like, you're basically a late first valuation for Garoppolo, right?
Right.
And again, that's to get a quarterback. If you're not giving one, that you're kind of over a barrel to pay that. But again, I think that there's maybe other ways you could go. Probably Goff. I mean, that offense is awesome. Like they're putting up points all over the place in a bunch of different ways there. Yeah. So, I mean, Wentz might be cheaper, right? Like, there's guys that might be cheaper than Garoppolo. And Garoppolo hasn't been a huge ceiling lifter either, fantasy wise, for himself otherwise. You know what I mean? Where I think Wentz and, I mean, heck, even Goff have had higher fantasy successes in their career.
Yeah. I think it's too early to trade away Trey Lance Burks. We're seeing a strong market share. And the fact that that Robert Woods hasn't been a big impact of go sit over there, rookie. I think we're seeing positive signs for Trey Lance Burks with the opportunities. We saw a jump from week 1 to week 2. And I was one of the bigger fans of his, with where he was going, especially in round 1 of rookie drafts. So I've stuck with him. And I think you gotta, if you are going to do this, and sell really early on Burks, I think you got to aim a little higher or differently. And I would just I'd rather send out a 23 second and, maybe something less to, get a quarterback in that zone. Mm-hmm. And I hate to call Garoppolo a live body, at the position, but he's not really going to be in the top 10. He doesn't run at all. And this is still probably going to be a very balanced team. I mean, when he has multiple touchdowns in a game, that's not the expectation. That's a down game for Patrick Mahomes, but that's a good game for Garoppolo. That's the difference. So I just think you have to be very careful about paying for something that has a pretty limited ceiling. Helpful. Absolutely helpful. But I just wonder if you could operate in a 5 to 8 quarterback bucket and say, without Burks, can we pay something else?
Right.
What do you think this one is? I think it's pretty slanted for the Burks side, but that's mostly because I think a lot of people are going to be, well, this is a rookie, that had a mid-first valuation a few months ago. And Garoppolo just got this job, and who knows, by the end of the year, he may be searching yet again.
75% in favor of Burks.
I was going to go 85. Oh, it is 87.
Oh, you're looking at these early. You're getting
no, I actually wasn't. No. All right, next one, we got another Trey Lance. So we've got Jared Goff and a 23 first, and this is what we're kind of talking about here. Jared Goff and a 23 first for Trey Lance and a 23 second.
Isn't this Lance for a first just by a different name? Like
Lance for a first and Goff for a second.
All right. Yeah. I like the Goff and the Lance side. I like the Goff and
the
Lance
side.
I like the Goff and the first side. I think that's a good way to do it. And again, I think maybe you're probably thinking there's a little bit more value there to Goff than just that second, right? You don't know if you can get that done. Like there's added value in having that part of this deal in there because you don't know if you can get that done.
Right.
Just giving a second to the Goff person, like now you sort of lock that in, you know that's an added piece of this puzzle that's there as well.
And I think that the big benefit here is Goff might be playing his way to a few additional years as a starter. I just, it's weird. I have this weird way of looking at quarterbacks sometimes I look at them and I go, can I imagine them in their late 20s, not at 35, not like a Joe Flacco situation. Can I imagine them in their late 20s and for the next 5+ years, just sitting there clipboard holding, and they're basically an injury away guy? We don't really see that. They either completely flame out or they're always someone is willing to take a shot. One of the bottom 5 teams at quarterback. And maybe they draft, we saw it with Mitch Trubisky, right? I mean, they're going to draft a quarterback, but not someone at 101. And then they need a bridge guy. They need someone that can win the job and maybe keep the job for the whole year if things go well, part of the year until they get hurt, whatever that means. And I think, guys like Winston, guys like Goff, guys like Wentz, I just have a hard time sitting there and thinking that they're going to be in the NFL and for years on end, they're going to turn into Case Keenum and just sit there and be a backup. I have a hard time seeing that. We haven't really seen that. I guess Bridgewater might be the closest thing to that. I mean, I think he's on a backup track that I don't think he's a week 1 starter by any team's plan going forward. He might be the closest thing to that.
Yeah. And he wasn't the high pick. Yeah, I mean, you look at him; he wasn't the high pick. I mean, and he had limited success compared to the other names I mentioned at his peak. His peak was not all that great. Right. Now there was,
but I think this is perfect
before he rebounded. Right. Yeah. So yeah. It would be weird to see. And again, it's one of those things. Like, are we seeing a new NFL? Is this a change? Like, are we going to see teams just say like this isn't kind of like the big man in basketball? Like we don't care about quarterbacks that are sort of approaching 30 that have done it that we kind of know aren't elite because they're a value drain on our team.
But aren't we seeing Jared Goff? Like he was left for dead because it was like, we'll give a pick to just get rid of that albatross contract. We are so adamant about moving on.
Right. And
we're seeing that, I mean, what do we call them? Functional plus?
Yeah.
I mean, not just functional plus, value added. I mean, this might be integral to the Lions turning things around faster than just we're in the weeds.
Yes.
We're in the weeds at quarterback. But this is a perfect construction. See, I love this because you're getting a quarterback back that has actual upside for this year beyond a Garoppolo. Jared Goff upside beyond Garoppolo, and you're getting the pick upgrade. And we've seen, yes, this could turn into 203 to 110, but the graphic upside of it could go mid to late second and go all the way up to something significant in the first round. And it's only 2 games in. So this whole assuming the first is super late, you don't know where this leads in a month or two.
Right. We've lost two quarterbacks in 2 weeks. Like it's real early yet. Like a lot of things can happen.
And we really haven't had the running back injuries. Through 2 weeks, it's been pretty light. I think I think it's 3 depth charts, that we've had a missed game week 1 or week 2 from the projected starter.
Right.
It's pretty light. Pretty light. And usually you get a lot of 5+. And really the only one on that 5+ radar right now is the 49ers with Elijah Mitchell.
Yeah.
Many more to come. Last one, Amon-Ra St. Brown. He is white hot. You actually texted me about him this week. So Amon-Ra St. Brown and a third for a 23 first, 23 second, and a 24 first, all super flex.
This is too much to.
This
is a lot. I mean, that's a huge return. You take the picks. That said, we could do a resorting of the wide receiver position and all of a sudden come back and be like, Amon-Ra St. Brown, a top. I tweeted it out.
You say 12, 10? Where'd you go? What was your line?
Why he's not a top 12 guy, right? Like you start looking in that range and you're like, and again, this is the thing from last year. And this is why I think that data is important and taking a real hard look at some of these situations. Amon-Ra St. Brown was into a situation last year where he was there was a total lack of receiving core, right? It was basically him. Swift was hurt, Hockenson was hurt. They didn't really have other receivers, and it was basically him. And they threw the ball to him a ton.
Created offense. Yeah,
he got open a ton, and he did a lot with the targets that he got. He caught a lot of them and ran good yardage with those routes. So on one hand, I think you look at that and you say like, wow, like that's actually a pretty good accomplishment. You go into a situation that's not good as a day 3 rookie, and all of a sudden you come in and you're like, dominant's a little bit of a strong word, but you could see
I'm the captain now.
What's that?
I'm the captain now.
I didn't hear you. Sorry.
I'm the captain now. That's what he was basically doing.
Yeah. And really taking over. So on one hand, like you see that and you're like, that's something that's very difficult to accomplish. Not a lot of people do that. On the other hand, people were saying like the only way that's possible is because Swift's out, because Hawkinson's out, right? Because there's no one there, right? There's no Jameson Williams, there's no DJ Shark, and all
Perfect
of that.
Well, people use that same argument for Brandon Ayuk, right? That when he produced that first year, it was because everyone was gone.
All right. But like now I think we see Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I don't know if that's like, maybe part of it is that Hawkinson's not that guy, right? Maybe that's part of it.
He's not an offensive tilting player.
Yeah. I mean, he's like, Amon-Ra St. Brown's a wide receiver 1 on his team and like has done nothing but dominate through the last like 10 weeks. And like he's a very good player. And I think if we did a resorting, we would be somewhat shocked. The 2 guys that are pretty tepid about day 3 wide receivers, like he has far exceeded any expectation of him from where he was drafted, and that's when you are able to move them. That's when you're able to move guys like Diggs. That's when you're able to move guys like Hill sort of out of that bucket of just a day 3 wide receiver, up into saying like, okay, these guys are true dynasty core, dynasty assets. Amon-Ra St. Brown is absolutely in that category now, and a really strong performance over the past, we'll call it 10 to 12 games.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I have aggressively moved him up in recent updates. I do wonder, we always talk about like storylines and the what if. I mean, they drafted aggressively a wide receiver this past year in round 1, but it happened to be the one guy that we knew early this year wasn't going to play. Mm-hmm. It was Jameson Williams. What if that was Chris Olave? What if it was Garrett Wilson, who are performing well to start? What if it was Jahan Dotson? What if it was Treylon Burks? And they picked the one guy that it was going to be a midseason arrival date. And I just kind of wonder, again, we'll see what happens. But DJ Chark has not been much of an impact. Josh Reynolds, we kind of know what he is. And like you said, Hockenson has not taken that step forward. The one thing I thought was interesting, and maybe he's on such a high plane, you mentioned Diggs and Tyreek Hill and some of the biggest day 3 outliers we have seen. But even the guys that have been successful, and again, maybe in the upper 1%, we're talking about just, hey, all rules are off. But like in general, still pedigree matters when you talk about longevity of roles, longevity of production in the NFL. Round 1 wide receivers, when they're a success track, they just are more. They just last longer. Mm-hmm. They just have more allegiance contractually. And again, going back, they probably are better players, just on average. A lot of times draft gets it right. Maybe not in the exact order, but round 1 versus round 4, they get that right a lot. Round 2 versus round 7, they get that right a lot. So I do think that's interesting, because one of my drivers in player value, one of them myriad, is that, even if you're on the success track, it's by your pedigree. So, that he's round 4, he's not going to have that same multiplier number factor in there as, a Rashad Bateman, if he's on the success track, or Treylon Burks, or, just, guys with more and higher pedigree. So that's one thing that, again, if he's on the top 1%, the top 5 players, from day 3 over the last 10 or 15 years, what does that look like versus just, success track, can mean something far lower than, like you said, dominating a passing game for now. We're moving on past, half a season through last year and this year to now. It's probably going to be a big chunk of this year, if not the whole thing.
Yeah, for sure.
So just to go back, so 2 firsts is too much.
Yeah, I don't believe in doing that for wide receivers, but
just any wide receiver as a general rule.
I mean, it's got to be his name's probably got to be Justin Jefferson for me to do that.
And they probably don't sell for that, so that's
right. So as generally, I'm not in that business, but yeah, I do think like when you look at when you like he doesn't warrant this cost, but he definitely warrants a higher cost than coming into the season. Absolutely. I think you definitely have to appreciate what he's done and really move the needle on him.
So would you pay a first plus for a wide receiver / Amon-Ra St. Brown?
Would I pay a first plus? I think, I would. I tend to not be in that business generally of those types of like I like Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I was actually plugging him during the summer, but it gives me a little bit of a pause to sort of be in that range because there's so many guys sort of in that range that I sort of hate paying the top price. I would just rather take the bottom guy of the tier and not have to pay a first plus for him. But I think like that's an appropriate cost. Like it's. Like if you take and re-rack the 2022 class, like Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be and should be up at the top of that class in terms of what your future expectations of him are based on what he has done today. Like that's where he's at. So I think it's perfectly appropriate to pay that cost.
One other deal I found in the database is Amon-Ra St. Brown for Brandon Ayuk and George Pickens.
Brandon Ayuk and George Pickens.
How close does Ayuk have to get to St. Brown for the rest of the year to make you feel okay with that one?
He's got to really go. I mean, he really needs an uptick in value. Value.
I mean, but within like three points per game,
something like that.
Something like that.
I don't think I see that. Right? I don't think as I squint at him, I don't think I see that. So,
do you think later this year, Jameson Williams will be a reason for less optimism than today for St. Brown? Do you think he will matter at all to the calculus?
Oh, I mean, I think he's going to make the offense better. I actually think it could be a growing, the pie could get bigger. I think
be a better DJ Chark within that role or something.
Yeah.
Not a subtraction from Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yeah. And what actually, like, even if he's a good 2, like, I don't know if they have a 3 that super concerns me from like a high volume standpoint to stand in the way of Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like I liked Hawkinson coming in, but he's done nothing to truly tell us like he's a guy that's going to get in the way of a receiver that's a stud. And I think that we are heading in that direction with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like those guys aren't held back by tight ends that don't do it at a huge efficiency perspective, that aren't, Kittle or Kelsey, right? Like even Kelsey didn't hold back Hill, you know what I mean? So, what will interest me like is if this team, what I think could hurt him is if this team goes out and sort of gets and has to get a new quarterback, right? If they go and draft somebody and then all of a sudden, like this is a situation where, you're going through a phase of of a retooling, of a rebuilding with a quarterback, and this team isn't going to pick at the top of the draft, I don't think, right? And so you're going next year with quarterback 4 or 5, something like that, instead of Goff, which we know what we're getting with Goff. And I think that's a plus for Amon-Ra St. Brown, both in style and in security of what we know, right? Those are good matches for him. So that would be sort of my longer term concern about him, is if this offense gets sort of jacked up. But I really like what's going on in Detroit.
What do you think the play is with Hawkinson? Do you think you try to move up and pay? Or is there someone that might be even or below market wise that you say this is a quality pivot?
I like Goddard. I've always liked Goddard more, and if that's still there, I'm interested in doing that. I think that sort of pivot.
Okay.
I mean, I play in a couple of tight end premium leagues where I had, I have and one in particular where I have Fant, where I have Hawkinson, right? And I kind of thought, over the past couple of years, like I'm sitting on high floor guys. That has not, like,
floor's a lot lower than you think.
Yeah, I mean, that goes quickly. And again, that's like there's a couple of rules that which we can always know. One of them is like tight ends from like historically from like tight end 6 to tight end 15. It's a lot flatter than we ever talk about it in the off season.
And trying to sharpshoot the most expensive options of like, well, they're way more likely. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, what were if you polled people in August and you said, who are you most likely to feel good about starting this year? And you put it like Hawkinson versus Evan Ingram. I mean, it would have been 90% plus on Hawkinson.
Right.
And then, but again, we're not talking straight up. See, but the problem was you could have gotten Ingram plus.
Right.
But now, 2 weeks in, what do you think that percentage is?
Right.
Ingram's utilization, his routes, he's on a potential rising offense. Questions at wide. I mean, I feel pretty confident that he's going to be somewhere in that same bucket of tight end 5 or 6 through 15. He's going to be in there, and Hawkinson, is going to be relatively in there too. But again, it was 90-10 a month ago.
Yeah. And honestly, like that's one of those things where I always have to convince myself it's right. Like whether it's a sport, like you've gone through this, like where it's a sport with tennis or like with, when I was playing a lot of golf, like I knew like on certain holes, like if I hit my 3-wood, like I knew I wasn't going to get in trouble. Like I could close my eyes and just stand there on the tee and know that like, as long as I hit it, I'm not going to be in trouble. Like I'm safe with this club in my hand. There's certain rules like that in Dynasty that
wasn't tight end like quarterback. Isn't it like just wait? Who's the big time profile, and you just wait for either the injury or just a little bit of shine to come off of him for some reason. This is the off season.
Yeah,
that all of a sudden
it pays for 6, right? Don't
Kelsey,
be the sucker that pays for 8.
Just like Kittle's hurt, right? And the whole thing is like, oh, he's getting older, he's injury prone, blah blah blah. But that's the reason he's accessible. But he's good. If he just wasn't such a darn good blocker. And then with Kelsey, oh, he's too old. Well, you're going to start him every single week this year. So, like, how many years of possible questions, woulda, coulda, shouldas of Hawkinson or these other guys is that worth? 1 year of Kittle, of Kelsey. What is that worth? And he's accessible. I mean, people push him down in Dynasty to what? Tight end 3, 4, 5 in some of these drafts, but he's accessible. Like if 2 weeks from now that team is 1-3, you got to go knock on that door.
Yeah.
3's company. Knock on my door. You got to do it. Because I mean, if you're paying big time prices or the next guy, I'll be good. Hawkinson, Schultz, Freiermuth, Dawson Knox. Go ahead. Try to sharpshoot. But you know what? They've never joined that top group. So who's been there? Who do we know is good? Who do we know can be in that group? Who's been in there 2, 3, 4 times? And just, can I get a deal on one of them? And if you can't, maybe you just pause button. And maybe in a month you can. Maybe next offseason you can. Maybe you just say, not worth it. So you just live in that bucket. Maybe you trade Hawkinson for, Ingram and a second. Or, I mean, we were saying, right? I mean, how could it not be Cole Kmet? Like, that's such easy, cheap volume. Right. Well, when they only throw 17 times a game.
It's putrid, right?
I mean, so he like basically hasn't scored. So it's just it's a really tough deal.
Right.
I mean,
knock on the Pitts owner. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Pitts has scored 7.8 more points than Cole Kmet has, and Cole Kmet doesn't have a catch. Right. Like that's
right.
That's I mean, the tight end position's all jacked up.
Well, and here's the thing. If Pitts is a 7% discount from what he was a couple weeks ago, the moment he has a game of more than 50 yards, or God forbid, 100 yards and a touchdown, it's gone. Like whatever, it's going to go all the way. Like the insulation factor with him is so high that the moment he has one of those games that he had last year, doesn't even have to have a touchdown, that it all goes away. And it feels like it's week 3 or week 4. Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Like, is that a worthy upgrade of just like, let's not mess around? Well, does Andrews cost that? I mean, can you get to Andrews for that? Maybe. I don't know.
In premium leagues, I think it's a lot to probably make that jump would sort of be my thought. I would guess in like a 2 PPR for tight ends, even in a start 1, I would guess you can't do that. That would be my assumption.
I was thinking more stock. More stock.
In more stock formats, I think it's closer. But again, there's only like 2 or 3 guys that you want to pay up for, and then otherwise you don't do that. But right. Yeah. I mean,
well, one thing we talked about, I think it was the Andrews versus Pitts conversation, or Andrews versus, or Pitts versus Kelsey, or just any of these combos of, Pitts is super young, but if he doesn't take the leap, and if he doesn't take the leap this year or next year or whatever, you're giving up the hammer at those positions. You're assuming Pitts is a hammer, and market value wise he is, but if he's not putting up the box scores, at some point you're like, well, I'm getting beat by Mark Andrews. And I took Pitts for the insulation factor. Well, you're insulated to do what? Trade him? That's always what I wonder about this insulation thing. Like, so you're insulated so that in the future you can trade away the guy that's insulated, but he hasn't produced enough for you to want to keep him. I find it very interesting and circular. Like, let me gain insulation so that I can get away from the guy that I guess I didn't believe in enough to produce and be a cornerstone starter for my team.
Right.
Interesting. All right. I want to remind you about the email update. All of your league mates are getting the Football Guys daily email update. And if you are not, get on the wagon. It's every single day in season around NFL draft time, NFL free agency. You want to have that fail safe of making sure you did not miss anything. So top right corner of the homepage of Football Guys, free email update. It's too easy. You'll start getting it every single day from Joe, Brian, and culled by the Football Guys staff for analysis. Jordan, you now get a contribution to the dumbest thing I did this week. And we did it together. Thank goodness 6.5 days ago, I made a note. And we were talking about a co-owned league that we were trying to construct some trades post recording last week. And Jordan ran into a tech issue. He was like, what is wrong with my fantasy league? What is going on? Jordan was locked out of trading, where Chad was freely looking through trades and being able to navigate the site.
What very frustrating experience
for
Chad.
At least 5 minutes. Jordan could not figure out, and I just picture the cat with the keyboard, on the GIF on Twitter, just banging away, doesn't know what's happening. And then you had the realization
that I was on the 2021 page, right?
You get locked out when you're trying to trade 2 decades ago in the league.
Yep.
And
I was a year back.
He was trying to trade 12 months ago, and all of a sudden the commissioner and MFL were not having it. So Chad was on the 2022 page, Jordan was on the 2021 page. That was the disconnect. And I'm imagining, all week I was trying to think, have I done something dumber than that? And the answer is no. And you probably haven't done something dumber either. So you had regression.
No, I managed to keep
you had positive regression. After that
good.
moment, you're like, I'm living with house money here on Wednesday, Thursday, all the way through today.
Absolutely.
All right, let's get a couple quotes here from the Football Guys Dynasty Forum this week. 2 solid weeks to start Jahan Dotson's NFL career. Passes the eye test. Sure, he will have down weeks, but I'm happy to have him on my Dynasty team.
3 touchdowns in 2 weeks on like 9 catches. Be careful. Like I like Jahan Dotson. One of my big strategies, again, some other like just things to set your watch to. Don't take the first wide receiver, take the last one of a group.
He was the last one.
Example. He was the cheapest of the first round wide receivers. You take him and you're happy with it. But just bear in mind, like it's not the volume to really sustain what he's done through 2 weeks yet. So
it's also a fun offense. I mean, they're splitting it around pretty heavily. They're getting Logan Thomas healthy. They're actually throwing to Antonio Gibson, which is a breath of fresh air. But they just gave a contract to Terry McLaurin. Curtis Samuel, finally healthy. They're having fun with that offensive weapon, their little baby Deebo Samuel type piece in that puzzle. And Carson Wentz is dealing. They have a lot of mouths to feed, and I'm not sure there's big upside from any one of them. And that's not even specific to this year. I just think you look at their commitments to players, and is Jahan Dotson going to be the go away number 1 wide receiver? I think that's a big question mark. Over Terry McLaurin, over the next 2 to 3 years, or are they running Batman and Robin style and don't have a big time quarterback, and then maybe don't have the market share consolidation like in Miami, for example? I think it's a lot of questions, based on ceiling, with Jahan Dotson. And like you said, I mean, he's getting by on touchdowns right now, and that's great. But volume is what pays the bills, and market share. So if you can get those things working in your direction, and we will see. But surely, late first, early second was a common price point for him. And like you said, the last round 1 guy this year, and he's shown at least signs that he can play.
Yes.
So that's a positive from the late first, early second. Last one, it's about Kyle Pitts. We already talked about him a little bit, but it's one more week. If Kyle Pitts can't perform, he has to sit.
He has to sit.
What do you think? Well, no, this is an interesting idea. Well, what do you think about the idea?
You sit over there.
Fading, yeah, you're horrible in a position that's categorically horrible in general. But what do you think about the idea of giving, is he an auto start player that you just keep starting him?
He's just motivating. Are we talking about motivating our fantasy players? Is that what
Well, no, but just if you have Kyle Pitts, do you really go, well, in week 4, I'm going to start Evan Ingram? Where's the line of insanity versus, well, he's bound to break out of this funk, whatever this is. Does he fit the criteria, the threshold of he's too good of a player to have this bad of a stretch, let's say, to create a narrative? Do you wait for him to blow up on your bench and then you feel good about it and then you put him in your lineup? What would you do?
I'd have to feel really, really good about whoever the backup was to play him over Pitts, right? And you just go back to, we talk about your priors and all that stuff. Coming into the season, we had a really high, we probably had a lesser of an expectation for him. I think the market did in general, but it was a top 5 tight end expectation, right? So that stuff is more, we could do an Adam Harstead segment on this.
He said it's the you give it a month, right?
Yeah,
pretty much.
Right.
You go with priors, and then as October starts cooking along, you start adjusting and saying, we have more of a sense of what this season is. But it's 2 games. We're at 2 games.
Yeah. And if these were the worst 2 games of the season and they happened in weeks 4 and 12 and no one, and it not consecutive to start the season, we wouldn't even think much of it. So I wouldn't get super worried about it. I do think it's week 5, week 6, week 7, somewhere in that range.
He's still in a funk. Yeah.
Then you're in the then you're in the buy window as well. So it's going to be harder to sort of fit him in there. But yeah, I would play him. There's nothing to really suggest that he's fallen off. It's just that he hasn't gotten, you
probably have to have a Goddard type to really say, I feel like I got a little bit of a lineup decision here.
I started Hunter Henry over Goddard this week, and I can't look myself in the mirror. It's Tuesday, and I still can't look myself in the mirror.
How bad has that been with Hunter Henry?
It's been real bad. Real bad.
I remember having a discussion with you and just about a 2 tight end decision, and it was I got to take Hunter Henry, the floor play. Well, the floor is 0. The floor is absolutely.
Turned out we were wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, who'd have thunk? He's 27, quality profile, going to be a starter for quite some time. Yeah, starter doesn't mean jack.
Good.
It means they're going to go towards Nelson Aguilar with high point balls.
Good.
Yeah,
gracious.
yeah. Pitts is, where is Pitts? Scrolling. He is wide. Yeah, tight end 35.
So
that's pretty bad.
Not great.
Not great, Bob.
Not great.
He's
15th in routes run.
Right. He's one good game away from top 12, though.
Yeah.
That's how flat tight end is.
Yeah.
He's razor close.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been sluggish. It's been sluggish.
Not a great start.
Yeah. Time to trade him for Gerald Everett plus.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any final thoughts? We covered a lot of ground, but is there a player just on the tip of your tongue? You got
Tyler Conklin leads the tight end position in routes run. So a guy that was firmly, I remember watching some Devy games with you and doing some segments on Central Michigan, and Tyler Conklin was the guy we talked about. We're talking 2017. So
I had to watch something on Central Michigan.
Yeah. So I remember Tyler Conklin. So we'll give a shout out to him. Him and his 0.61 yards per route run on the season.
Yep. I love that. I'll give a shout out actually to Raheem Sanders, Rocket Sanders there, starting running back for Arkansas. Watched him play in high school, scouted him for some of my late Devy picks when he was coming into Arkansas's depth chart, which is always big, but they run a committee. Not this year. No. Raheem Sanders, starting running back. And I think he was either the top rushing option in the SEC among running backs or near the top. So significant two-way player. He's got a little David Johnson to him. Got a little, two-way go. Antonio Gibson type of can definitely run some routes. He's got some big time speed. You better run faster than 4.6 if your nickname is Rocket.
When's he draft eligible?
This is true sophomore year. So he would be 2024.
All right.
But yeah, I got to see him local high school, and I was like, who is this guy? He played wide receiver, a little bit of running back, but dominant player on one of the dominant teams in the area. So it's really cool to see him go to a major conference and then gain that starting role for sure.
For sure.
All right. In this episode, we discussed Trey Lance, discussed some pivots, Amon-Ra St. Brown in the marketplace, of course, 49ers, a little bit of Tua, and Dynasty trading as always. I'm Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara. And until